Hello everybody, my name is PPCC, and today we will be casting 2 matches of Supreme Commander Forged Alliance. This is a fairly old multiplayer game, although it still has a very active multiplayer community, and I just restarted playing this again, so I figured I might as well cast a few matches I play. This is the first match out of 2 that I played with a fellow named VG2012. I'm playing as the Supreme Commander here. He is playing as the UEF Commander here. Now I figured I might as well create a little series of videos for a few of the newer people, for people who haven't really played this, or for people who just essentially like to watch spectator multiplayer games. Now I'm playing as the Seraphim, a relatively easy faction to play due to their low number of units and their ability to multitask with their units. What you see me doing right here is the standard build order. You bring out your first factory, in my case is a land factory, and I put out 1 engineer and 1 scout unit. Scout unit I send out, and it will go around the base and it'll go around the enemy and essentially survey his defenses. Let's slow this down for a second and let's take a look at my initial build queue for just a moment. I start off by building 1 land factory, 2 power generators, and a mass extractor. And in the middle of that, I built 1 engineer first and foremost, and 1 scout drone. If I hold shift, you'll see that I send my scout drone near the middle, to the side of the map here, near the middle of the left-hand side of the map, and I send them to a location just below this ridge. Now, why do I do that? Well, if you notice on this scout unit, it has quite a large radius outside of the red zone, indicating radar detection, and I want to scout out when my enemy claims these 2 mass extractor points. The mass extractor points on the map are crucial for expanding your industry. You have 1 hydroelectric plant thing right here and 1 here as well, and those are to provide power. I sent my first engineer to reclaim the rocks in the surrounding area. You can do this by holding down the Alt-click key and clicking on a location. That will commence the fire attack move command, which will allow the engineer to essentially go about on its own pace, capturing locations and such. Now let's put this game back onto normal speed. Now, if there is a plant, a hydrocarbon plant location near you, be sure to take it right away. This is absolutely crucial. If we take a look, if we slow this down and take a look at the cost for a hydrocarbon plant compared to a regular power generator, you'll see that the hydrocarbon plant creates about 5 times as more power as the standard power generator. So it will take 5 of these small power generators to match the production of 1 of these. Each one of these small power generators cost roughly half of the hydrocarbon plant. There's no reason not to go for this. As you saw there, I created 2 of these power generators first and foremost to balance out our power. I grabbed 3 of these mass extractors and I move on to take this one. In the meantime, I send some of my scouts out to possible enemy expansions here and here. Grabbing these mass points are crucial for your industry, so if you can, send your combat scouts or your tanks to cut off enemy engineers. Usually players will have these undefended at low levels, so you can see me down here scouting out the enemy's forces over here, and at the northern mass points right here, I essentially put my scout here just to wait for the enemy engineer drop to come by. In the meantime, I essentially scout out the resource points with a scouting unit. You see that my engineer over here is trying to move to capture 2 mass points over here. I send a combat scout just to kind of see what's up, and my combat scout takes out the enemy's engineer. In this scenario, I highly recommend the Seraphim faction simply because of its ease of play and the lack of units that you need to understand or have control of. For example, let's slow down the game and take a look at the amount of units at the tier 1 level. The UEF, which is apparently notably the second easiest faction to play, you'll see that it has the standard engineer unit and 5 combat units here. Whereas if I switch to my perspective, the Seraphim only have 4 to deal with. The combat scout takes up the role of both the land scout for the UEF and the light assault bot, combining the two, making it quite a versatile unit. It's one of the stronger traits of the Seraphim faction. Speed this back up and turn this to the better map mode. You'll see that I managed to sneak my combat bot behind the enemy's front lines, and it looks like my opponent didn't grab his hydrocarbon plant at the beginning of the game. So his engineer will go down right there, and it looks like my enemy has focused the middle of the map, taking control of the key resources here. Now, another thing to be noted of is that the UEF is the strongest faction in the game in terms of hit points and just soul damage, hit point ratio. If we look at their tanks, their Tech 1 medium tank has 300 hit points, whereas my Seraphim tanks only have 280, so they beat me on that front by 20 points each. Now, that doesn't seem like a lot, but in fights like this, it really comes down to the last little bit of health on every single unit. It's always very important to keep those up. One of the things that is crucial to success inside this game is parallel production of units. You'll see that right here I've put out 3 land factories right off at the start of the game, making essentially giving me 3 more queues to produce tanks, and I'm also producing a air factory right here. Now, compared to VG, look at the amount of units that he has, and look at the amount of units that I have. I have considerably more tanks. You'll notice that my resources at the top corner right here aren't very high, and it's always good to run a slight negative value on both of these units. Rather resources. It's simply because if you're not using all of your resource gain, then you're essentially wasting that material because you're not putting in the time, right? If you look at my opponent right here, he has more than enough surplus. He's producing way more power than he needs and way more mass than he needs, and he's actually capped out on storage on both of those. He's effectively wasting those 2 resources right now. I decided to use my ACU, your Armored Command Unit, to take out this particular turret, although it's not very successful, so I decided to back off.
Commander under attack.
And here you can see a small raiding force that I've sent over through the side of the map to hit my opponent's mass extractors. On small maps such as these, it will be crucial to have a small force on the side of the map just to keep an eye on things, such as this combat scout right here. It denies both this mass extractor to the enemy, but it also essentially puts out a zone of control right here where the enemy cannot go into without me noticing. Now, my personal favorite tactic with the Seraphim early game is to grab a air transport, load it up with the Tech 1 tanks, and just drop it near the enemies' refineries. And there's the GG of the game, and then that's round 1. See you people in round 2. Alright, second game. We're playing on a slightly different match here. I decided to go UEF, and my opponent, once again VG 2012, decided to go UEF once again. So now we're doing the standard two power 2 power point, 1 land factory build. You see that my production queue right here is going to be engineer, land scout, light assault bot, 2 light assault bots, and 1 engineer. I always like to have 3 engineers on the field at the beginning of the game. Speed this thing up. And this time we're playing on a very open map. There's corridors to the south and north of the map. It's a very resourceful. There's just an absolute ton of mass points on this map. Ton of mass can be essentially extracted on this map, so it's definitely full up on resources. On maps like these, expansion is key, but harassment is also very, very important. Here I made the mistake of leaving my land scout essentially idling here, but after a little bit I get it on the move. Let's take a look at our resource count right now. One of the things that you have to do when playing these 1v1s, or really any of the games, is just keeping track of your mass and your energy storage. Over here we've completed our basic build, grabbing 2 power generators, 1 factory, and the surrounding mass pumps. So now we can move down to the expansion. We still have that hydrocarbon plant. If we look at one of our engineer units, because the ACU can't actually produce the hydrocarbon plant, it will always cost near 160 mass and any given number of energy. For the purposes of doing mental mass, we will always be looking at the mass cost of the production facilities, or rather for anything. Simply put, energy is not as important as the mass, and therefore we must do some mental math, essentially converting 1 unit of mass into energy. There's been a lot of debate on this on the forums and such, but essentially it works out to 1 unit of mass is roughly worth around 120 units of energy. So that way we'll only work with mass instead of working with energy and mass, which makes calculating things so much easier. Over here I had wanted my engineer. Let's actually slow this thing down by a little bit. Over here I had wanted my engineer to expand into the mass fields over here inside this canyon. Now along the way, since we're building so much stuff over here, I'm going to have them using that Alt-V command, Alt-click command once again, to claim some of the mass in the form of rocks over here. And once he gets a suitable distance close to those mass points, I'll have him pluck down the reactors. Keep in mind that reclaiming resources takes less time, and it usually grants you more mass than plucking down an extractor. Extractors are good for the long term, although short term reclaiming works. Typically on a 1v1, the player that is reclaiming mass in the early game will win, as opposed to a player who does not do so. Here we go, get some more land factories onto the field. Land factories and factories in general are absolutely critical. I cannot stress that enough. No matter how much you raid, no matter how much you destroy your opponent on micromanaging your units, grabbing economy, getting whatever sort of lead early game, if you do not build extra factories, you will lose, is the general consensus of what I've found. Now, as the UEF, I do not have that land combat scout, so my scout here can't actually take on his engineer directly, so I need to bring in some more units. It's a very big pro of the Seraphim faction, having those land combat scouts, which are able to take out enemy forces very easily. Here I moved my small infantry force here on the move. You'll notice that the radar identification comes up way before the actual identification comes up. Now, if that was the enemy's ACU, I would be in a lot of trouble right now with this small force that I need to keep alive. So In these situations, always move the least valuable troop forward. It's a little micromanaging trick that'll save you a lot of grief. So right there, I moved my Land Scout forward just to kind of look at that, and then I moved my actual combat units up, because the combat units can actually function without the scout, but it doesn't work the other way around, sadly. And that goes. Now this sidebar menu right here, the thing that I'm highlighting is very critical. You can see that I have 3 idle production lines, and you always want to keep those running. You can see that now we're down to 1, and now we're down to 0. It's always good to be queuing up those. You'll see some minor level action going on here. If the red player over here actually if they kept their tanks with the engineers, then those engineers probably would have been alive right now, but they're not, sadly. A cool UEF trick that you can do is to produce a land factory here and then build an air transport and then load up these miniature gun bots, these light assault bots, into the craft. The UEF have a fairly cheap light air transport. If you grab one of these and quite a lot of these miniature bots, you can essentially make a well, the community dubs it a ghetto gunship, due to these light bots' ability to shoot from the aircraft. You see that my opponent has decided to harass my mass extractors. This is exactly what he should be doing. Sadly, I have quite a lot of forces here, and he decided to move forward rather than backwards, which is a mistake for him. The UEF have the strongest tanks in the game in terms of health and firepower. So right now, this is toe-to-toe. This is tank-to-tank combat, pretty much. This is one-on-one. In this scenario, it really comes down to whoever has the best micromanaging and the best formation. Now, what I mean by that is that you need to kite your opponent so that your tanks will always be firing. You must have as many tanks as possible of yours firing on the enemy, while it's trying to keep theirs out of range. So what I mean by that is, take a look at this tank right here, or rather this one. He can only shoot slightly farther than the lead tank, whereas my lead tank has a huge range. So if I had only those 2 tanks on the field, my firepower would only be roughly 1 tank, simply because the other one is always catching up to the other. And here you can see the ghetto gunship at work. It's always nice to scout out the areas beforehand. However, I didn't have the luxury of doing that, so I've just decided to bring in the ghetto gunship and essentially use it to sweep out the enemy's mass extractors like this. But bear in mind that these gunships are very, very, very cheap in terms of the plating on the ship. So there's not a lot of health on this unit. They kind of skimped out on the metal, making this unit very fragile in battle. The good thing is that the enemy is mainly depending on these medium tanks. They haven't gotten any air power yet. But then I noticed that there's some flak coming down on my unit. I try to snipe this mass extractor. If I slow this down, you'll notice that I'm trying to kite these mobile anti-air guns. I want to move far enough back so that he cannot shoot me with them. You see the ranges here, but I want to stay close enough to the mass extractor to take it out, and that's what that is called kiting. But it looks like I couldn't have done that, so I pulled my gunship back. Now in RTS, in really any strategy game, in any fast-paced strategy game, your units should always be doing something, whether it be guarding, say, a position here, expanding, giving me a forward base here. So meanwhile, my opponents are producing anti-air guns over here in the back of his base. Now that doesn't mean that his forward units have any air cover. So I decided to move over here, sweep over that little group of opponents, and there goes the game. I will see you guys later on. Bye bye.